I'm sure if you live in North America, you probably have lots of fond memories at a big box store called Walmart. One memory you might have in particular is the pet section that Walmart had. I'm sure many of you are familiar with pictures like this, the fish aisle or the pet aisle. If you are old enough to remember the Walmart fish aisle, you either probably have lots of nostalgia for it, or lots of disdain for it, or a big mix of both. For me, it's a big mix of both. I have many fond memories of this aisle as a kid. Most of the time I wouldn't get any fish because my parents rightfully said no, but I used to love just watching them swim around with my siblings as my parents would just go shopping. Despite these fish being kept in pretty bad conditions, I didn't really notice because I was a stupid kid and they didn't really ever have a pet section at my local Walmart because it was too small, so it was always just really nice when we would go out of town and find a Walmart that did have one. There were some rare occasions where I did get some fish from Walmart, but these fish often died instantly, most of the time not even making the trip home, and the fish that did end up making it usually didn't last long either, usually because most households suck at keeping fish and because Walmart fish were usually kept in the most abhorrent conditions of all time. Walmart at one point did sell fish that you could buy, but in 2019, which was 6 years ago, God, I am old, Walmart decided to stop selling fish altogether. But why is that? In this video, I'm going to be talking about Walmart's history with selling pet fish and explaining why in the end they stopped selling them. Walmart started to sell live fish in the 1990s as the company expanded rapidly and marketed itself as a supercenter where you could buy just about anything. This would also include live aquarium fish. Walmart sold mainly freshwater species. They started off with just goldfish and rosy red minnows, which makes sense. These fish are relatively easy to acquire, they're incredibly cheap. Even nowadays, if you really wanted to get a ton of rosy red minnows, they cost 30 cents at places like PetSmart and are even cheaper in other places. These fish are sourced from a network of large aquaculture farms, especially in the United States, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, allowing Walmart to keep prices low. This also coincides with fish keeping seeing a massive boom in North America in the early 90s, as it was seen as affordable and easy for most families at the time. And because Walmart's popularity was because of its low prices, that also meant that they made fish keeping incredibly easy for most people. Whether that is for better or for worse, I'll let you decide. But they were mainly super cheap fish that were hardy and could be marketed that way. But by 2005, Walmart's fish program had expanded to almost 1,700 stores across the United States, and it is estimated by this point that Walmart was responsible for 30% of all pet fish sales in the country, which is an insane figure. This would make it one of the largest, if not the largest, fish retailer in the United States. Which makes sense. More people are going to Walmart than your average pet shop, so when a family sees cheap fish and fish tanks, it's no shock that sales were pretty good for the company. This was when they would hit their peak popularity as well. They still sold relatively cheap to get freshwater fish like betta fish, neon tetras, guppies, angelfish, cichlids, and goldfish. It got its fish from almost all across the world, from almost every single continent, for pretty cheap. But of course, this did not mean that there was no controversy to be had at all. I am sure if you ever got to experience fish at Walmart, you also probably noticed that they weren't really kept in the most optimal conditions. According to an employee, the company had strict guidelines for the care and handling of live fish, including regular water changes, temperature monitoring, and disease prevention. But most people didn't really see it that way, and a lot of groups would call out the company for putting fish in poor conditions and their poor transportation, with some groups making the point that the super cramped tanks and long journeys were the big reasons that a lot of them died. And I mean, I can't really blame them. I mean, look at some of these tanks. But for years, Walmart would continue selling pet fish until 2019, when they would announce that they would phase out their live fish aisles. And this was pretty big news at the time, and the company listed a few reasons. According to Marketing Scoop, which is actually a really good source of information, I'll link this article down in the description below. One of the reasons was that Walmart had faced criticism from animal welfare organizations for the conditions in which live fish were kept and transported. In a statement announcing the decision, the company acknowledged these concerns, saying, "We are constantly looking at ways to improve our animal welfare standards, and we believe discontinuing the sale of live fish is the right thing to do." The second reason was declining customer demand. According to industry experts, the market for live fish has been declining for several years prior to Walmart's decision, as more consumers turn to online retailers and specialty stores for their aquarium needs. "The live fish market has been shrinking for quite some time now," said Tom Tom Herron, Executive Vice President of the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council, Walmart's decision is a reflection of the broader trend. And the third and final reason, maintaining a live fish department is a costly and labor-intensive endeavor requiring specialized equipment, trained staff, and regular maintenance. As Walmart looked for ways to streamline its operations and cut costs, the live fish department became an obvious target. It's a very specialized category that requires a lot of attention and care, said Seth Mendelson, editor-in-chief of Pet Business Magazine. For a company like Walmart, it may not have been worth the investment anymore. But in short, it was expensive for the company to keep up with, and most people who actually wanted a pet fish were turning to other options. So throughout 2019, it would phase out all of its live fish sales, and by the end of that year, not a single Walmart would sell live fish. All fish that were not sold were either euthanized or put into places that could take proper care of them. Something that people also don't really talk about is the massive impact that this would have on the sale of live pet fish. Despite Walmart's sale of live pet fish declining in later years, they still had a massive grip over the market. One of the biggest things that happened as a result of this is that a lot of fish suppliers simply went out of business. Because Walmart was such a massive corporation, it could afford to buy tons of fish. So without that buyer, plenty of places lost money and went under. Other businesses would also jump on the opportunity to sell fish to people who would have just went to Walmart otherwise. And that's what happened to Walmart's fish. I got most of the information for that part of the video from one article by Marketing Scoop, which was written by Stephen Austin. I'll leave a link for it down in the description below. And there are still other places to get fish, and according to that same article, 37% of former Walmart live fish customers said they had switched to purchasing from independent pet stores, while 29% said they were now buying online. Honestly, if you want my thoughts, I think it is probably for the best this happened. Look, I love fish, I love aquariums in general, but personally I feel like most of the fish that Walmart kept were either put in horrid conditions or were sold to families, and then said families would abuse the fish and then dump them into lakes, rivers, and ponds, which is usually what happens to most fish that people get, sadly. Considering how easy it was to get fish from Walmart and how many families go to Walmart compared to other pet places, I feel like this was a fairly common occurrence, but that is just my personal anecdote. I might personally miss being a kid looking at the fish, but part of me is glad that it is over and millions of fish lives have been saved. When it comes to these big box stores, I'm not really a massive fan because you have these billion-dollar, multi-million-dollar corporations that need to sell, they need to make money, so they usually, don't really keep fish in the best conditions, and they buy, the cheapest ones. I'm not saying buying cheap fish is bad, but they usually, cramp them together in a place where they don't really have that much space, and they usually give people a false perception that the fish will stay small forever and then bad things happen. So I'm not really a massive fan of these massive, pet stores. There's also like small pet stores that do this, but you mainly see it with these massive ones in my opinion. But I would be lying if I said I didn't like seeing them to begin with, because I do. I love fish and I hope you do too.